Tonight we're talking about focal length and the differences that they have on people's faces, like the distortion or however funny they make people's faces look. We're going to look at 50 millimeters, 35 millimeters, 50, and I think 75 millimeters, and see what happens to my face when we change the focal length, okay? I love popcorn. You guys like popcorn? Okay, so if you didn't know this, the wider your lens is, the more distortion it creates in people's faces. The ideal portrait range, I think they say, is 85 millimeters. That'd be on a full frame camera. When you get into like the crazy wide volume lenses, you've probably noticed people's faces like they look silly or funny, and you might think, man, that person's ugly or has a weird face. It could just be because they're using a really ultra wide angle lens, but I thought, let's actually show you the difference. So we're going to dig into a few focal lengths and look at the difference of both how it blurs the background as well as, what it does to my face when, especially when you get to the edge of the frame or stuff, okay? So we're about maybe 3.5 feet or so away from the wall. So let's swap on some lenses and see what the difference in focal lengths do. Well, all right, thanks, Justin, and welcome to 15 millimeters full frame, or 10 millimeter crop, or 7.5 millimeter, and this is the kind of the vlogging ultra wide angle perspective. But what you need to know about ultra wide is not flattering. It can be a little bit, I don't even know if it'd be flattening. Typically what it does is it makes all extremities look like really big and weird, especially as you kind of like get to the edge of the frame and your nose starts looking like wild, and everything that you didn't want to be in the frame typically gets in the frame because it's just like so wide. So these lamps, which were out before, you can now see them, and you can probably see almost everything. And it's a very different perspective. I happen to like it because it looks that hyper realistic, kind of bizarre. It's not anything close to the way your human eye sees things, kind of like larger than life, and you can get all in the camera and feel wild and weird and wacky. And so it's fun. I like it. It's fun, but not flattering. So this is 15 millimeters, so check something else out. All right, welcome to 24 millimeters. 16 millimeter on crop, 12 millimeter on micro four thirds. This is still very much a wide angle perspective, but not nearly as distorted as the last one. You have to move back a little bit, whereas the last lens was like 1.5 feet away from me. This is 3 feet, which is still like really nice if you're in a tight space to still get lots of stuff in. You can also start to blur the background with these lenses because they typically will go down lower. This is a f1.6 lens. I'm shooting at f1.7 because it doesn't do f1.8, but that's basically what it's at. But the background's blurry. Yay! I love blurry backgrounds, but you don't get that same kind of hyper-realistic perspective. You get a little bit of it, but even as I move to the edge of the frames, not the same level of distortion. Maybe if I'm like all the way out here, it'll start to, maybe a little bit, but it's kind of, it's a nice perspective that is still a little bit different than, what the human eye would see. But 24 millimeters, let's move on to something else. Yeah, actually, before we move on, I want to hear from you guys, because this is an interactive channel where you guys are much part of this as me. What's your favorite focal length for doing these kind of videos or whatever kind of videos? I want to hear from you guys because the conversations in the comments are the best. So if it's one of these focal lengths or a completely different one, whatever you like, let me know and let us know. On to the next one. Ness, this is a 35 millimeter equivalent. So 24-ish millimeters on a crop sensor and a 17.5 millimeter, 18 millimeter, let's say, on micro four thirds. Now, you're going to notice you're starting to compress the background a little bit more. It's getting more and more blurry. There's going to be a lot less distortion, especially like even if I can get all the way to the edge of the frame, which ends up being a lot more of a challenge at these focal lengths is, it's fine. It looks actually kind of nice and pleasing, and faces will start to look a lot more closer to how they look at, kind of a human perspective. We're almost at 50 millimeters. That's the goal for having a natural, what we see as human beings, okay? And this is a 50 millimeter perspective, which they say is like basically how the human eye sees. Very, very similar. So people are going to look very normal. Normal's good, right? 50 millimeters, just, it's normal. Now, you know, the camera right now is probably about 6-ish feet back from me. So, you know, you need to have a little bit more space depending how much air you want to be able to shoot. But you're going to notice if I lean this way or lean that way, there's a lot less drama happening. Drama? Drama. What do you guys say? Drama? 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 So, you know, this is nice too. And again, the background gets nice and compressy. 50 millimeter f1.8 on a full frame is quite cheap. That'd be about a 35-ish millimeter on crop sensor, and again, a 25 millimeter on micro four thirds. And, you know, it's very, I would say, a pleasing way to be able to shoot people, provided that your camera can keep up with the autofocus, or you got to be able to lock it off and not move too far back or forward. Yeah. And here's 75 millimeters or 50 millimeter on a crop sensor, or a 37.5 millimeter on a micro four thirds. And this is more of a flattering angle. What actually starts to happen is the lens kind of compresses people's faces, makes them look a little bit thinner, and they say just generally more flattering. Whereas, you know, with wide angles, your nose and everything starts to distort. This looks pleasing to the eye. So, can be nice, but we're about, I don't know, 8 to 10 feet back now, so you need to have a lot of space to be able to fit something like this in. And again, this test is going to be very, there's nothing that's really going to be happening other than my lighting probably changing a little bit, you know? So, the thing to think about, though, is that this may all seem very subtle, but if we were to go from this back to this, you might be saying, wow, Justin, you look horrible. And I would say, thank you. Well, I'm sick, you know. So, but regardless of that, on the 75 millimeter or the 50 or the 37.5, whatever you want to call it, is movement in your face doesn't really change too much. But, like, look how big my nose can get. Actually, let's go this way in the light. Like, it just starts, like, everything in my face, especially as I get in there, can just start to, like, really distort and look funny. And so that's just something you need to watch with the wider angle that you go. And again, the longer your focal length is, then the more flattering it is to faces. So, you know, hopefully that was a good test. And let's just maybe roll through a few of the different options here. And I will just tell you that, yeah, again, I kind of like this hyper real perspective. But obviously if you're shooting, you know, models or people who want to have their faces flattered, then, you know, shoot with a longer focal length. But I think of poor vloggers like Casey Neistat, where everybody's like, your face is just a mess. I think if you met the guy in real life, you'd be like, wow, your face actually looks way better than it does on the vlogs. And, you know, that's just the nature of how these lenses work. So, well, a really quick test on, you know, differences between focal length. If you're like, hey, your shots weren't lined up properly, or this wasn't the most scientific test, I don't care. Honestly, like, other people who do those scientific tests, for me, it's like, if you can't notice the difference between those little tests, then don't worry about it. Like, honestly, don't worry about it. Sometimes people are way too fickle about camera stuff. I don't really care. If you notice, you notice. I made my popcorn.